Hi everybody, welcome to Bio 21. This week we'll be talking about histology, and it's a really fascinating field. So keep in mind as we go through this material that we could spend 17 weeks just learning about histology, and it actually is kind of a theme, right? Every week we could have spent an entire semester on each of those topics, and this is just another one that is in the list of the things that we're covering in this class. So our lecture outline will look like this, and it only has two parts really. So we're going to be talking about the different tissue systems that make up the organs, that make up the organ systems, that make up our bodies. And then we will briefly touch on the idea of there being a connection between form and function. It's a major theme in biology, and we'll go over some examples. For now, I want you to think about all the animal cells that you can come up with, all different types of animal cells. Right? Think about all the different animals that you come in contact with, whether they're pets that you have, animals you work with, if you see them when you're out and about, right? Think of all the different types of animals, and then zoom in and start to think about all the different types of cells that make up those different types of animals. Right? They all have similarities. We talked about the similarities of a common universal cell, and we talked about the similarities of animal cells. Right? One of them is that they have to be able to exchange material with their surrounding, right? They have to be able to get rid of their waste products and also bring in products that they need to normal cell functions, right? Another similarity is that they have to bring in molecules to perform normal cell functions, and that requires energy, right? So they're constantly obtaining energy from organic nutrients. The other similarity that all cells have in common, all animal cells, is that they are taking the building blocks, all of those monomers that make up the biomolecules we talked about earlier in class, and they're breaking them. They're breaking down those molecules into their monomer form, and then taking the monomers, right, and reforming them into other molecules so that they can do other jobs, right? So they can send signals or create, synthesize proteins, right? Think about all the proteins that have to do things for the cell, right? All of the enzymes. It's a lot. So they're constantly synthesizing complex molecules. They also have to be able to detect signals in their environment. So think back to our signal transduction pathway exercise, right? Think of how we use cyclic AMP, right? We're constantly sending signals between individual cells, either in the form of molecules or molecule messengers, or through action, like the actual exchange of ions, right? So exchanging ions or complex molecules, basically. So we're trying to detect and respond to signals in their environment. And then we just talked about genetics last week, right? So all of our animal cells are going to they have come from another cell, and they're capable of undergoing mitosis if they pass all of their checkpoints, right? So they're able to reproduce. So it's important to slow down and appreciate all of these complicated functions that our individual cells are capable of doing on their own at any given moment in time, right? We owe the world to them. But they don't start off that way, right? Our animal cells typically begin life as a single cell, and then through a series of cell divisions, they become this complicated multicellular organism, right? So that change, that step of a cell becoming specialized during embryo development is crucial to building these different, it's crucial to building an entire organism. We've only been talking about the individual cell or the entire organism. We've spent some time talking about individual molecules and how they're kind of maybe what they're doing as they travel from an individual cell throughout the body. But this lecture is about talking about the connection between individual cells and the functions of the organs and the tissues that those cells make up. So our individual cell specializes, it differentiates, and that allows the cell to zoom in and start focusing on only doing one particular type of function most of the time during its cell cycle. Okay? And I've used this term a couple times already. It's called differentiation, and it's a vocab word. So I want to make sure that we're clear on the idea that our cells, they start off kind of ubiquitous and blobby and just basic, and that's our stem cell. But after undergoing differentiation, cellular differentiation, they become their true self. They specialize and they become either a blood cell, a bone cell, a fat cell, a muscle cell, a sex cell, an immune cell, or epithelial or nervous cell, to name a few. So there's this concept of emergent properties, and that's kind of the connection. That's the step we're making. We're making a leap. We've been talking about individual cells. Now we're talking about what these cells do when they're together in a group that we're going to call tissues, right? A bunch of specialized cells together in a group are now called tissues. They're not called cells. We call them tissues because there's so many of them and they're all doing similar functions. Right, so by themselves, none of the individual tissues, right, that make up a bladder or make up a kidney can actually do the whole function of a kidney. If we slow down and think about the tissues that make up our organ, right, here we have 4 different types of cells: muscle cell, neuron, epithelial, and connective cell. A bunch of those will make these different tissue types. But the different tissue types, the nervous tissue or muscle tissue, are themselves too specialized to actually hold liquid, move that liquid, expand and contract, right? As well as, and that's just the bladder, right? If we think of, and that's one organ, right? But our bladder actually is a part of a system. It's part of our urinary system, which is connected to a ureter and our kidneys. And these 3 things allow our body to actually perform the function of filtering our blood and removing waste products from liquid, right? So when these individual tissues come together, they can form organs that are specialized, and these individual organs, when they come together, are able to create an organ system that's able to do a job that was previously too complicated to do with any of the parts that I just mentioned by themselves, right? You had to do them all, you had to unify them all together, they had to come together. So when combined in precise ways, we can get the actual system that purifies the fluids in an animal's body, which is our urinary system, right? So, and this is just a closer view so you can kind of see the different components I just mentioned. And that's just one organ system, right? There's a lot of organ systems in the body. We've got a respiratory system, we've got a reproductive system. I mean, there's a ton. So, so that's what histology is that's histology's superpower. It starts at the tissue layer and looks at the function of those tissues and their role in the organ and their role in different organs and how those organs connect to make an organ system. Okay. So tissues are association of many cells that have similar structure and function. And our tissues in a typical animal's body can be classified into 4 types. And we've already mentioned them, right? We've got muscle tissue, we've got nervous tissue, there's epithelial tissue, and connective tissue. So that's what we'll spend the next couple videos talking about in detail.